Movies can have a lasting impression on you and bring back great memories. Certain images you will always remember. Things that have been with me all my life and keep getting added to with every movie I see.
I will turn this place into the fucking Wild Bunch if I think you are fucking with me.
E.T. phone home.
This is the end of your rotten life, you motherfucking dope pusher!
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Welcome to My Celluloid Heart Podcast, Season 4, Episode 138. This is a podcast where we take two films that live in our head and heart and bring them together over two episodes by one topic or theme. It's still convoluted, but I think you get the gist. I'm your host, Phillip Duke, and I'm here with...
his cousin Chip. Hello, everybody.
Right. We're going to start off the show with a little bit of sad news that we just got today. Today's Wednesday that we're recording this. Bruce Willis has aphasia. So it's either from a stroke, from a tumor that's starting to grow in his head, or just a degenerative disorder. So he's retired from acting, which is sad. So there's two things. There's one that makes you feel sad because I laughed at the movie The Fortress that he did. I think we talked about it last week maybe. And I was like, he's doing these direct-to-video movies that you're like, that's what they're called. They're just B movies. And you're like, oh. But now you're like, oh, poor guy, you know. But also, like, as I was thinking, I was thinking before we started recording, I'm like, oh, my recasted. He could have been like the Marshal or somebody. Like, he would have been cool.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that's so our thoughts and prayers to him, because I loved him in Moonlighting. That's where he first, came into my life and made me the guy that I am with my sarcasm and whatnot. So you have anything to say before we get on to Tim's stuff?
Love you, Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce, Bruno.
But he's surrounded by family. He's got a big family that are going to be around him all the time. So that's good.
Yeah, and you gave us, he gave us what he gave us. Like, we got Die Hard, we got, all these great things. Hudson Hawk, our biggest episode of the podcast is Hudson Hawk. It's crazy. Most downloaded. So from Tim over there at Lighting Up the Marquee, did a movie called Sushi, little short film. So I wrote him and I said, hey, let me know. There's so much going on with your movie. I need to know what's going on. So he says, we are currently finalists in the New Jersey Film Awards. And either tomorrow or Friday, we find out the nominations we may get. And then those awards will be announced Friday night. And then the final results to the Golden Lemur International Film Festival. We were honorable mentions for best cinematography for Nick, and honorable mentions for best producers to myself, Nick, and Alex. And also at the Golden Lemur, we won the best lead actress in a short film for Erin. So that wasn't honorable mention. That was a win, like lead actress.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, she's really good in it. So now, and he says, thanks for us producing the show. Are you ready to get to some corrections? We got one. It's not big. It's not even a correction, but I'm going to put the clip in there, blah, blah, blah.
You were wrong. Wrong. Finger guns. Wrong. Wrong in your weenie.
John Carradine had David Carradine first. Like, remember I said, he had all three kids.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And for one, you and I couldn't think of Robert Carradine. That was And
such a simple name. Nope.
But then I looked it up on Wikipedia to find out what John Carradine, how this worked. And John Carradine seems old in 39. And you're like, how did you have David? Like, did you have David at an old age and the kids? Like, what the hell? So he was with this one wife and he had David Carradine. Then he got with another woman and had Keith and Robert. So Keith, I always thought Keith was older than David, but Keith's the middle kid, and then Robert's the youngest. And so anyway, so that was that story. So David, Keith, and Robert. So that was just a small thing. And then I asked Chip, I said, count out how many John Wayne movies you've seen. And he said, fuck that. And I said, okay. So I've seen 32 John Wayne movies. Then there's a whole bunch more. But I get what you're saying. Like, what's funny that we talked about on our Rio Bravo episode was after Rio Bravo did so well, him and Henry Hawks were like, Let's just redo that. So they did El Dorado, and they kept doing kind of that same thing. But I've seen those. I've seen True Grit. I've seen Rooster Cogburn. But it's interesting where in this movie that we'll get to in the facts, but we haven't even started the show yet. But it's interesting that this was his first big. He had been in like 15 movies before this. Your microphone keeps popping. I don't know why. This was the first one. John Ford's like, no, I want him. So now let's get on with the show. Are you ready?
I am. Let's do this. Pilgrim.
The movie is, of course, now considered a landmark among Western films, a movie produced by Walter Wanger, directed by John Ford, and released by United Artists. It's a movie which actually turned the whole Western genre on its ear, first by using the vistas of Monument Valley to help tell the story, but also for the first time having characters in a Western who are both good and bad, complex and multi-dimensional. Most Westerns, which had come before Stagecoach, painted everything in very sharp contrast, good or bad, black or white. It's far different this time, and in the hands of director John Ford. Stagecoach is also the film which started John Wayne on the road to superstardom. In the 1920s, Wayne had done bits and extra work for John Ford, who then recommended Wayne to Raoul Walsh to consider for the starring role in a big budget Western Walsh was directing in 1930 called The Big Trail. Well, Wayne got the part, but the film had been kind of a disaster. So for the next decade, the only film work John Wayne could get was grinding out dozens of B-level Westerns at dozens of B-level movie studios. At that time, the Duke had absolutely no status in the movie industry at all, no marquee value. Still, he was John Ford's first choice to play the lead in this big John Ford production. Ford obviously seeing something in John Wayne nobody else did. Walter Wanger, for instance, wanted Ford to cast Joel McCrea in the part, but Ford held out for Wayne. Claire Trevor was also Ford's first choice to play the barmaid named Dallas, and she was, by default, the highest paid performer in the cast, being paid nearly 5 times as much money as John Wayne. But this film changed John Wayne's paycheck totals and his future. From 1939, also with Thomas Mitchell, who won an Academy Award for his supporting performance in this movie. Here's Stagecoach.
How dare you? He only said Pilgrim in like one word, and then everybody just went with that. Stagecoach, 1939. The plot: a group of people traveling on a stagecoach find their journey complicated by the threat of Geronimo and learn something about each other in the process. So yeah, John Ford's like, they say Geronimo 3 times. That's all. Like they only mention, but the way they mention it is makes you go, oh shit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Stars Claire Trevor as Dallas, John Wayne as the Ringo Kid, Andy Devine, who I'm sure Chip loved, as Buck, John Carradine, he was the driver of the stagecoach, John Carradine as Hatfield, Thomas Mitchell as Doc Josiah Boone, Lois. I always get that confused. Not Lois, because Lois Lane, Louise Platt. Yes. Goodness, she's rolling over in her grave yelling at me. As Miss Lucy Mallory, George Bancroft as Marshall Curly Wilcox, Donald Meek as Samuel Peacock, and Burton Churchill as Ellsworth Henry Gatewood, the fucking bank owner. It's written by
that fucking guy.
Written by Ernest Haycox. He wrote the original story. And then John Ford's like, hey, let's make this movie. And he got Dudley Nichols and an uncredited Ben Hecht, who writes a lot with Billy Wilder back in the day, wrote the screenplay, and he writes his own shit. But then they wrote the screenplay, and it's directed by John Ford. Have you seen any John Ford movies? Did you notice the greatness? That's Chip clapping. Yes. Of John Ford, like his eye, the artistic, like you would look at a shot and just be like, oh wow, her walking down that hallway is like whoa, that's amazing. Or certain shots at Monument Valley or whatever. Very cool. So are you ready to get into casted.
Yes, I want to see what you got. Throw it at me.
All right. So I got Emma Stone as Dallas because I see her as sexy. She could be a prostitute. Like maybe like she's got that look.
She could do it.
Well, I mean, I've seen her in what was that movie called? The Favorite. She was in The Favorite. She played kind of this evil kind of woman, but like was sleeping with the queen and this whole thing. Anyway, I have, and I know, like Chip said last time, like I don't want to reuse people, but I reuse some people. So here we go. Emile Hirsch as Ringo Kid, because I could see him being likable, lovable, being able to do some shit. Because he was in that that movie with Mark Wahlberg, that True Story. What's that called? Anyway, the soldier one. Anyway, Jonah Hill as Buck. So
Nice.
the driver, I see him being funny and being, you know, kind of like, no, we shouldn't go. And the marshal being like, no, we're going. And he's like, fuck.
Well, always being cut off every time.
Yeah. And I was thinking of maybe an older guy, but I thought Ryan Gosling as Hatfield, like being the suave guy who's also kind of a creep underneath, like, you know, and fits that role of like wearing a nice suit with a nice hat. Sam Rockwell as Doc Boone, being like drunk and just being like, I was like, I could see that.
No.
Jessica Chastain as Lucy Mallory. So I've always liked her, and I almost switched them. I almost had Emma Stone be Lucy and Jessica Chastain be Dallas. But I was like, no, Jessica Chastain is Lucy Mallory, who's like, you know, I'm higher class, blah, blah, blah. Everybody should see The Eyes of Tammy Faye. It's really good. Jessica Chastain, she won an award. We'll get to the Oscar conversation at the end.
Yeah.
I was going to get to it in the beginning, but I don't want to derail her shit.
Oh, I know.
Christian Bale as Marshal Curly Wilcox. So this one I fought with. At first I was like, here's the thing with us living in our minds of you're 47, I'm 50, but I'm like, who would be a good marshal? Oh, Kurt Russell. He'd be perfect. And then I'm like, Kurt Russell's like 70 something. I'm like, no, we need a guy who's younger. And in these old movies, when you watch them, you probably did it more. I didn't really look at ages, but you see a guy and you're like, that guy's old. He's probably fucking 60. And you look it up and you're like, he's 47. Holy shit, I'm 47, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So I was like,
The West ages a man.
It's just old movies. I think it's old movie. I remember watching a movie. I'm like, man, that guy looks 60. And I look it up and he's 49. And I'm like, he's my fucking age at the time that I watched that movie. I'm like, holy shit. So anyway, I thought Christian Bale would be good as Marshal Curly Wilcox. And I was going to put a Carradine into Hatfield. And then I said no, but I did, to pay homage, Keith Carradine is Samuel Peacock. So Keith Carradine will be the guy that's selling the fucking whiskey, you know, the whiskey salesman.
Yeah.
And then I know I used him before, but I like him being a grumpy old bastard. John Goodman as Henry Gatewood.
Oh yeah, that works. That works really well. That's awesome.
All right, Chip. What do you
got? All right, let me stretch here for a second. Oh, gotta get this ready.
And pick on your fucking Carrot Top as Ringo Kid.
That's gonna be awesome. Oh, okay. So for Dallas, I have Amanda Seyfried. Is that how you say her name?
Seyfried. Yeah.
Yeah, Amanda Seyfried.
That'd be cool.
For the Ringo Kid, I have Chris Pratt.
Interesting. Hang on a minute. Okay. Yes. Interesting. I mean, I like him. Now's where it's not going to all be lovely. Now that we've done this for a while, now I can pick on you. Chris Pratt is becoming to me a little bit too cocky looking in his acting. Like you're almost like, stop being that guy. Like give us some more, kind of go back to Parks and Rec a little bit, be kind of a nerdy, dorky guy, and then give us, but like to be a hero. But he would be good as Ringo Kid. He's good in Jurassic World. He's good in Guardians and all that.
Well, I really saw it because of the whole jail thing breaking out, avenging family, falling in love. Like I could see him doing the smirking and the smiling to the pretty girl, but then all of a sudden be like pig-headed about doing what he's got to do.
Well,
freaking out.
And it does kind of go with it, because on the commentary that I listened to, the guy was saying Ringo Kid has been in prison since he was 16. So he doesn't know love. He doesn't, like, that's all he kind of knows is like this vengeance.
Yep.
And what his idea of love is as a 16-year-old, or whatever. Okay, Chip, I'm excited about Buck because I want to talk about Andy Devine when we're done here. Go ahead.
All right, Buck. I have Jason Segel.
Jason Segel. Hang on. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. Big, tall, lanky motherfucker. Always showing his dick. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No,
I could see him being that person where he's tall, he's bigger than everybody else, and he's trying to exert himself, like get into the conversation. They keep cutting him off. He's like, oh, man. He's getting so pissed.
And just talking to himself all the time.
Yeah.
And just, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. Real quick before we move on. So Andy Devine, did you love this character? I was thinking, I think Chip loves Andy Devine now. I think Chip's going to be like, oh my God, he's got that high pitched voice and he's just funny. You're just laughing at him and it's so great.
Yeah. And I don't know what else I remember him from, because there's probably a couple things I've seen him in before that I didn't realize.
I don't know
his
if
voice is what kicks in. Like, his voice right away.
I don't know if you saw The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, but he was in that as one of he would always get a steak and it was on the cuff. Like he never had to pay. It was like, but we'll look it up for next week. We'll talk about where you've seen him. Okay.
Cool. Hatfield, I have Christian Bale.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Christian Bale would fit that really good. Ryan Gosling does, but Christian Bale might fit it better. Yeah.
Yeah. And I see it as because Christian Bale's very good at the back and forth of like gaining weight, losing weight. I could see him losing a little weight for this part to be a skinnier,
Val Kilmer type.
Yeah. Doc Boone, I have Adam Devine.
Interesting. That's whenever I was writing down Andy Devine, I kept thinking Adam Devine, just because he's funny. But that'd be interesting, playing a drunk.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. That'd be really interesting because he's always been just like the goofball. Yeah. And now he'll be like the drunk who has to get sober to like.
Yeah. And I could see him totally doing that part, like, give me a lot of coffee and just throwing up and then doing his business and then turn back around going, I need another drink.
Yeah.
All right. Lucy Mallory. I have Anna Kendrick.
Okay, cool. You must have been watching like that movie recently. The starts with P.
Pitch Perfect.
Pitch Perfect. Yeah. You must have watched Pitch Perfect.
So for
that'd be good.
Marshall Curly Wilcox, I have Luke Wilson.
Luke Wilson. Okay. Who's he? Owen. Okay. Luke. Okay. All right. Yeah. That'd be
Luke,
good. Yeah.
Because I could see him next to Jason Segel going back and forth.
Yeah.
Him just cutting him off and going, no, we're doing it my way.
All you've been doing is talking. Yeah.
Yeah. For Samuel Peacock, I have Ben Kingsley.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I could see him being the timid, but then trying to like jut his way into a conversation going, I believe, and then just kind of like, what's your name again? Peacock.
Yeah.
Peacock. Yeah.
And
then finally.
Yeah, just being an old guy.
Yeah. Finally, for Henry, I have John Lithgow.
Interesting. Oh, that would be good. Oh, I used to hate, I was thinking about movies. Chip and I have a list of movies that we're going to do. We never know until I'm like, Chip, you pick or I pick or whatever. One of the list is a movie called Blowout, and John Lithgow's like a bad guy in it. And I remember years ago, all I knew John Lithgow was bad guy. So then when that sitcom came out of Third Rock from the Sun, I was like, I don't like this guy. He's a bad guy. And then you realize, like I've said with the Demi Moore story,
Henderson's?
I've never seen it. I've started to watch. Chip just fainted. Chip, wake up. I started to watch it once and I just couldn't get into it. I know everybody loves it. I should have seen it in the 80s, but I didn't. But
everybody who's listening to this,
they're all
I need you to go bitch at them.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to do something with Harry and the Hendersons. And
Harry and the Hendersons with Predator. With
yeah,
Arnold.
that works. It's all in the woods.
The same actor. It's the same actor. I remember that now. Yeah, it's the same guy playing Harry and the Predator. It was almost JCVD playing the Predator, but it didn't look right. True story. Chips and mouth just dropped to the floor. But then you realize acting is what makes you hate these people. Like Disclosure, Demi Moore's story is where I hated Demi Moore. I'm like, I hate that bitch. And I'm like, oh, it's because she's so good in Disclosure that I despise her, but I like her in other things. So it's the same thing with John Lithgow, where you're like, oh, he's just acting like a bad guy. It's like my dad would say about, Henry Winkler, like Fonzie, he's not cool. He's fucking 5 foot nothing. And I'm like, Dad, he's a comedian. He's playing. Well, he shouldn't have taken that part. I'm like, whatever. And then one time, speaking to John Wayne, I said, Dad, have you seen this movie, Brokeback Mountain? And he's like, oh, it's a fucking gay movie. No, I haven't. And I'm like, no, but it's a good love story. I go, I know you wouldn't see it, but, and then he's like, John Wayne would never be in Brokeback Mountain. I said, he might, to stretch his acting ability. And then I thought about it. I'm like, no, John Wayne had a type, had his thing that he had to be. And even when Spielberg came to him, was like, I want you in the movie 1941. I want you to play General so-and-so. And he's like, no, I know that real life general. I'm not going to make fun of him. He's a good guy. And it's damn. Oh, okay. And same thing I told you about Steve McQueen when he wanted Steve McQueen for Close Encounters. Steve McQueen's like, no, I read the script. And then there you have him crying in the shower. He's like, my fans won't like to see me cry. They're not going to put up with that. And it's like, well, it's true. Your fan base. But anyway, Chip, that was a good recasted. I like it.
Sweet.
How did this movie come into your life? You said you might have seen it when you were a kid.
It's possible because my dad, there was always those Sunday Westerns that were on TV that Dad would watch every time. But me, I probably was sitting there in front of that same TV playing G.I. Joe and go pew, 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 and shooting stuff. So it's very possible I saw parts of those many different John Wayne movies over and over again, one of them being Stagecoach.
Well, and the thing with these old movies, first of all, I forgot to put do not disturb on my shit, yo. Thing with these old movies, isn't it interesting, these old Westerns, that you almost go like, you almost think like that's how the Old West was, which in a way nobody really knows. Some people know because they've told stories through the years of what it was like. But it's interesting to watch these old movies and you're like, was it really like this? But riding on a rickety stagecoach, like I was thinking about it when it comes to her having the baby. She's had the baby. Normally a woman's in the hospital maybe a day, 2 days after having a baby. She's had the baby the day before. She gets on this stagecoach. It's bumping. Like that hurts my vagina, my whatever. Like, oh, I'm like, can I lay on the top or something? Like lay on my back? Like, oh. But yeah, this movie came into my life. So years ago, I used to think John Wayne was his generation's Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I was like, oh, he's just a tough guy that does this thing. Not really an actor. He's just a guy that's a figure that is a big 6'4" guy that can walk around and do this shit. Yeah. And then my friend Joe says, Joe Weedman, not Joe Merle. Joe Weedman says, have you seen The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance? I said, no, I haven't. He said, oh, you should see it. I'm working at the video store, managing the video store. I put on Man Who Shot Liberty Valance at home. I watch it. And I'm like, holy shit, that was great. Had me almost in tears. I was like, great. So then I go and I start renting all these John Wayne movies. And I get more out of it. I'm like, oh, he's not just an Arnold Schwarzenegger type. He's got some acting. He's got some stuff that he does, which is really cool. So when I saw this movie, I remember being like, wow, that's really good. And then every once in a while, I'm like, I'll check at Zia Records, wherever I'm at, and I'll be like, do they have Stagecoach on sale, Criterion Collection? But it's like $30 or something, these Criterion Collections. So I'm like, oh fuck. And I have the Criterion channel. So I'm always like, is it worth that to buy this movie? It's a great movie, but do I need to? Same story you have with every movie. And then when you watch it, you're just like, man, this is good. Like, but it's good stuff.
Especially for the time, like the time period when you think about the shots that they got, outdoor shots, and then even stuff that was on stage, they did really well to make it just kind of cut together. It was really good.
Well, and even there was the thing of sorry, I had to bring up some of our comments. Even what they said was like Westerns were almost dead. And John Wayne, I don't know if I wrote it here. So John Wayne had been in these B movies. And so they were like, who? So the producers like, hey, John Ford, here's who I want in this movie. I want like Frederick March or Gary Cooper, and I want what's her name? Marlene Dietrich in it. And they'll be a good team. And he's like, no, I see. Like, I want, he's like, I want to use John Wayne. And they're like, John Wayne from those B movies? Like, no, fuck that guy. Like, he does, he tried to make it big at one point. There was a movie called The Big Trail, and it failed. And so then he was just like stuck in B movies. And John Ford's like, I want to use him. And he's like, I want to use Claire Trevor, who was big at the time. So that's why Claire Trevor is the biggest name. And then John Wayne's under her. And so when he's doing this movie, so first of all, Westerns were almost dying. He brings us back of like, I'm put all these characters together and talk about, like we talked about on our Becoming an Adult, like characters, like each character so different, so cool. Like they all got their own thing. But it was, but this kind of brought back the Western, and it brought John Wayne into prominence. So you can't watch this as a John Wayne movie. You have to watch this as a movie with a guy like you and I watching Bradley Cooper back in the day. We were like, oh, I like that guy from Alias. And then when we'd go to watch a movie, Bradley Cooper be in it. We were like, oh, cool, it's that guy. And he would kind of astound us. And we'd be like, oh, that was cool. I love that he keeps going. So it's kind of like that, where you're not knowing who this guy is. And, I'll get to some stuff later, but it's very cool. All right. You ready to get to some listener opinions?
Yes, I am.
Well, you gotta have an opinion.
Well, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
I hated this movie.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
I like it! Opinions vary.
I am Pasco, wrote a great movie. I'm not a film critic, and I can't really put into words why I like this movie so much. It's full of elements that we would probably now think of as cliches. But in this movie, with these actors playing these characters, it works. And it works well, thanks to the direction of John Ford. Nobody could get John Wayne to perform quite like Ford.
Oh, yeah.
And then Tim Martin over there at, Lighting Up the Marquee, makes movies, Sushi, go see it. Well, you can't see it yet. Got to go to the film film conventions. He wrote, quote, an essential film in cinematic history, unquote. So it's very true. And I can't wait to hear what you thought of this, but let's discuss this film. Are you ready?
All right. Yes, let's do it.
Right. In June 1880, a group of strangers boards the Stagecoach from Tonto, Arizona territory to Lordsburg, New Mexico. Among them are Dallas, a prostitute driven out of town by the Law and Order League, the alcoholic Doc Boone, pregnant Lucy Mallory, who is traveling to join her cavalry officer husband, and whiskey salesman Samuel Peacock. Buck, the stage driver, looks for his shotgun guard, and Marshal Curly Wilcox tells him that the guard is off searching for the Ringo kid. Ringo was broken out of prison after hearing that his father and brother were murdered by Luke Plummer. Buck tells Curly that Ringo is heading for Lordsburg. Knowing that Ringo has vowed vengeance, Curly decides to ride the stage as guard. So what was cool about this? Did you pick up that Mallory was pregnant?
No.
because this
He just
guy
kept
was
asking if she was sick and if she was feeling well, and that was all. So I thought that she was trying to get to her husband because she was actually sick. I had no clue until
yeah, because they're saying when people watch this today, they might clue into it. And then the other thing, did you watch this as, I mean, for you, it was your first time watch, so you were probably watching everybody and not John Wayne. But did you at least know that maybe this was John Wayne's first movie to kind of like how he was acting, like not his first big, the first movie that blew him up? Yeah,
because I could tell you know that it's actually an early movie for him because of the fact that the way he was acting, he wasn't acting like the straight, like strong John Wayne. Kind of, you know, where a lot of times he's kind of almost like a combative, character more than anything. Where in this, he was the one being,
he was
the
lovable.
nicest and lovable. And the young John Wayne, basically, he was being that character, which kind of sucks because I wish how he was acting in this movie, he would have carried through most of his career. Because he became this very stout person.
Kind of a cookie cutter where you could have went off and done all kinds of different things. He did play Genghis Khan in a movie once, but that's weird. But wasn't it great? Like they're kicking her out because she's a prostitute, and then they kick the doc out because he's a drunk, and the doc and her are just like, take my arm, fuck it, let's go, fuck these people.
Let's get the fuck out of here.
And what's fun that we will get to, but the characters who are supposed to be the law-abiding, like perfect people, they're not the perfect people. Perfect people and the good people are the reprobates and the fucking, these just misfits that find each other.
Which through the movie, there's parts where when they're talking, they're saying that it's pretty much about survival. Like they're to a point in life where you just got to figure out how to live. And so it's not that they're bad people; it's that they have to do, not so great things just to live in that atmosphere. Which, understandably, you're in Arizona, me being from Arizona, you think about living that type of a lifestyle in June in Arizona. Fuck, no AC. And you're in this stagecoach this whole, like, oh my God.
Well, and the one where the thing where Doc even tells, like, so first you hear that Hatfield is a gambler, and blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden it turns to he's being nice to her, but he's also kind of like, I don't know about her when he's gambling with those guys, and then he's like, I guess I'll ride on the coach to be the guy I should be and try to protect this, I'm good with a gun, and the marshal's even like, I know you are, like, almost like, we've dealt with everybody that you've killed, you're like a Doc Holliday, you've killed all these people. And then even Doc Boone in the thing when he's like, I dug a bullet out of somebody's back. So now it's like, oh, you're not a respectable gambler, you've shot somebody in the back, and then when
which for me, I was like, I took that as a situation of if somebody was stealing from him and trying to get away from him with his money or, whatever, that he shot him in the back. That, like, if you're running away with my shit, I'm not going to say, hey, turn around. And, I'm going to shoot you in the fucking back. Give me my shit. Especially then. So
that's interesting. I took that as you shot somebody in the back because you're disreputable, and you're trying to be reputable, but you're not. The only people that are reputable are Dallas, the Doc, Ringo Kid, Buck, and the Peacock, of course, Buck, but anyway, as the stagecoach sets out, U.S. Cavalry Lieutenant Blanchard announces that Geronimo and his Apaches are on the warpath, and that the small cavalry troop will provide an escort to Dry Fork. Upon seeing her distress, gambler and Southern gentleman Hatfield offers his protection to Miss Mallory and climbs aboard. So they've kind of had, that's what else is interesting with the direction of this film. It's not the acting per se, it's the reacting. So like her looking at him and him looking at her, or even Ringo Kid, like not saying anything, but watching everybody, or even what we'll get to later when the baby's born, Ringo Kid's fucking staring at her like almost in a Chip vibe of like creepy with the waitress. I'm like, Chip, stop. And the waitress is like, I'm calling the police. And Chip's like, but I admire you. And I'm like, pours coffee and get out while you can. So at the edge of town, Henry Gatewood, a banker, absconding. So he's like, here's your receipt, $50,000, no problem. And then you see him get down by the safe, and he puts the money in his bag and then closes the safe and leaves. Absconding with embezzled money, flags down the stage and joins the passengers. So the lines have been cut. No telegrams coming through. No telegraph wires are down. And Gatewood's like, oh yeah, I got a wire. I got to take it. And the marshal later is telling Buck, like, I don't know how he got that wire. It makes no sense, you know?
Yep.
Further along the road, but it's cool because then, like any good movie, you forget about that in a way. So when that part comes at the end, when they get to where they're going,
which it's funny because they threw it at you twice.
Yeah.
Because Doc mentioned it.
Yeah.
And saying it's kind of funny. How did he get that message? And then it goes to them talking on the top of the stagecoach to each other saying,
yeah, they
weird.
said that's something else. The way that Ford works that out perfect. Like it'll jump to the top of the stage with them having a conversation, go inside the stage for them having does it a couple times, like just laid out really well.
Yep.
Further along the road, the stage comes across the Ringo Kid stranded when his horse went lame. So I wrote here whatever he said, but John Wayne was coming from B movies. And at one point, Claire Trevor said that John Ford grabbed Wayne by the chin. This part's cool. Like he was acting, he was doing some part. Yeah. John Ford grabs him by the chin and says, what are you doing with your mouth? Don't you know that you don't act with your mouth? You act with your eyes. Claire Trevor said that Wayne learned 8 volumes of acting on Stagecoach.
Wow.
So Ford would be like, walk like this, and like all this kind of stuff. So it was almost like he's making, and they also said John Ford seemed to me like a Sergio Leone type. Like he wants to be like Sergio Leone wants to be Clint Eastwood, but he can't. But in his head, just like us writers too, you and I aren't like our characters that we write about, but you want to be that character. Like you're writing this hero character, and that's Sergio Leone with Clint Eastwood. And that's John Ford with John Wayne being like, here's how I want you to walk. Here's what you should do.
He's living vicariously through his acting.
And Clint Eastwood said it was always funny when little fat Sergio Leone would be like, and then you do this. And he'd show him like with the gun or show him what to do. And he said, it was just funny. It was this like little roly-poly guy, like trying to be me, you know, it's funny. Though Curly and Ringo are friends, that part's cool too. Curly takes Ringo into custody and crowds him into the coach. So I like when he's like, Doc Boone's like, hey, did I fix your broken arm? And he's like, are you Doc Boone? Like, it's just so like, just two friends meeting like that would never meet before. Like, oh yeah. And he's like, oh, my brother's dead now. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And even though you were drunk, you did a pretty good job. Yeah. And that's something else where somebody said, this guy on this commentary I was listening to was like, why is Doc Boone an alcoholic? What did he do? Did he do something really bad that made him turn to drink? You know, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Like, wow, that's dark.
I don't think it has to do with something bad. I think it's when you see enough, because you're living in an age where you're digging bullets out of people's backs. Yeah. And there is no,
and you can't help. Yeah. Not enough.
There are points where you can't, surgery and stuff like that has not gone that far at that point in time to where he can really help, where a lot of times if an infection comes in at all, you're gone. It's done. So you got to be fast. And he probably saw a bunch of crap.
Yeah, for sure. When they reach Dry Fork, they learn the expected cavalry detachment has gone on to Apache Wells. Buck wants to turn back, but most of the party votes to proceed. The group is taken aback when Ringo invites Dallas to sit at the main table for lunch. So I wrote here, such pieces of shit these people are. Yep. So that's what's cool, is it shows how, for one, like we said, maybe he's been in prison since he's 16. He doesn't know any better. But also, like, it's the social mores of them is like, oh no, this is what, and his thing is like, fuck society. Why aren't you sitting down? Why don't we ask the woman what she thinks? And remember, like they ask John Wayne, like, what do you think? And he's like, why don't you ask the woman? Yep. And then she's like, I don't really give a shit. Like she's at the end of her rope, just like Doc. Doc's more like, I'll fucking die on this stage. Let's do it. She's more like, I got nothing to live for, really. Like, fuck it. But it's so good when she sits down and then they all move to the other end of the table. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, what assholes?
Well, and John Wayne's
and that
like
John
ready to go deal with it. She stops him and says, it's not about you, it's about me.
Yeah, because he's like, this is just because I escaped from prison. Like, what the fuck? And you're like, oh no, you don't know she's a prostitute. And even if you did know, you wouldn't care. You know, when he was like, do I know you? She's kind of like, oh shit, you know. Yeah. As they are eating, Hatfield reveals that he served in the Confederate Army under the command of Miss Mallory's father in Virginia. So I put here, it's funny that the part where the sheriff and Buck come in. So he's like, come on, Buck, we'll eat later. We got to switch your horses out. And he's like, okay. And then when they come in, everybody, they're like, come on, guys, let's go. And you see Buck over there grabbing, like making a sandwich real quick. And I'm like, but the sheriff didn't eat. Like, what the fuck? Poor sheriff. At Apache Wells, Miss Mallory learns that her husband had been wounded in battle with the Apaches. When she faints and goes into labor, Doc Boone sobers up and delivers the baby with Dallas assisting. So this is something here too. This is about John Ford. So people said for a long time that Citizen Kane was the first movie to show ceilings. Like, you know how when the sheriff walks in and you can see the ceiling, they were like, and that was in 41. And this is 39. And John Ford's like, no, I'm going to show the ceiling. I'm going to do a low angle of the sheriff walking in, putting the gun on the, bar. Also, the shot is beautiful of Dallas walking down the hallway, like I said, to go outside, and Ringo's watching her. Later that night, Ringo asks Dallas to marry him and live on a ranch he owns in Mexico. Afraid to reveal her past, she does not answer immediately. So go ahead.
We need to backtrack a little bit to when the doc is getting sober, because that was funny as hell. I love that he just like, give me all the coffee, give me as much as you can, and he's just drinking it. And they're like, they're basically saying that I don't think he could take this much coffee in, but that was the whole point, is that he's basically trying to throw up. He's trying to get the alcohol out of his system. And then when he like throws his head back up, and he's like, whoa, give me water. And they threw water at him. I love that when they threw it at him, some of it got on John Wayne. Yeah. So he goes, again. And when he says again, John Wayne just kind of steps out of,
moves over.
Yeah. He's like, let's get as little water on me as possible.
And then still, when he gives Doc the towel to wipe his face off, he's wiping his hair and his face. Then John Wayne wipes his own face where he got water on him. And you're like, oh, okay. But something else that I don't think I put here, and I might add it on a audio later, but John Wayne said this is his first movie like being like a main star with John Ford, and John Ford's like, go over there and wash your face in that bucket. And he's like, so I'm washing my face. And John Ford's like, what the fuck? Like, go wash your face. And he's like, I'm washing my face. Like, what can I do? He's like, just wash you're being dainty. Like, just wash your fucking face. And he goes, but that was the way he did it, was kind of picked on you if you were the underling, to make you, for one, rise up, but for two, like that was him razzing you and being like, okay, now you're good, So,
jeez.
So the part in the morning when the owner's wife left and the banker is thinking she stole his bag of money, but Buck, so he's like, where the fuck? She's a thief. And Peacock's like, I knew she was a thief. And then Buck is like, oh no, I was sleeping on it. I used it to sleep with. And he fucking and then he sticks his tongue out at him. And I put here, everyone's always quick to judge in this movie. Like, they're judging on the outside. And that's why it's cool after she has the baby, is the way she's looking at the prostitute, at Dallas, is like, are you looking at her when Mallory's looking at her? Is that because you're being like, I can't believe this woman is maybe more than I think she is? Or are you looking at her like, why am I letting her braid my hair? Like, what's going through your head, But and by the way, that woman who escaped, her name was Yakima, which is an inside joke to stuntman Yakima Canet, which we'll get to later, on the fucking best stunts ever in a movie, way before 1979 or 81, whenever Raiders. The next morning she accepts, but does not want to leave. So now she accepts the marriage, but does not want to leave Miss Mallory and the new baby. So she tells Ringo to go alone to his ranch, where she will meet him later. As Ringo is escaping, he sees smoke signals heralding an Apache attack and returns to custody. So that part was cool, where he's full bore, like ready to leave, and he looks up and he sees the smoke signals and he stops. And here comes Curly, like, what are you doing? And he goes to put the cuffs on him. He's like, no, you don't need to look. And he kind of glances over, and then it's like, oh shit. Then you see the smoke signal.
Yep.
And then they're like, well, you can't stay here. Everybody needs to get on stage. And that's where I'm like, oh, my coochie would hurt on this fucking Stagecoach.
There's no shocks on a stage.
Yeah, exactly. The stage reaches Lee's Ferry, another cool part, which the Apaches have destroyed. Curly uncuffs Ringo to help lash logs to the Stagecoach and float it across the river. So they were saying this was another thing for the stuntman, which they didn't have a way to do this, but they had this guideline that you can't see that are pulling the horses to the other side, because otherwise the horses wouldn't have made it. But also I'm thinking like this movie, poor horse. This is before, when you could trip horses with wires to make them fall. And it was, now he said, the stuntman said you do it a different way. But before it was like, you couldn't trick a horse to, a horse wouldn't be tricked to fall over or whatever.
Yeah.
So, just when they think the danger has passed, Apaches attack. This is the coolest part. A long chase follows where some of the party are injured, fighting off their pursuers. So what did you think about that? They're going like they're fucking like, I was thinking, you guys are coming to Arizona and your wife's taking pictures of horses. You guys need driving a car. All the horses are running, and take pictures that way, because this fucking beautiful. Yeah. And they said that's something John Ford always did, like motion, like he loved horses in motion, and like, just but it's the cool thing. Go ahead.
It was just weird to me, them throwing rocks at the horses to make them go faster.
Well, that's because to make them go faster, because if you're whipping at the reins, that's only going to make some of them go a little fast. If you're riding a horse, you use your little riding crop and you can kind of spank it on the butt. But when you don't have that and you want to go fast, you throw rocks at all the horses. If you did notice, though, the shot that was over Curly's shoulder while he's throwing the rocks, he's throwing them way in front of the horses. He's not really hitting the horses. But John Wayne, or Yakima Canet, if it was John Wayne standing before they go in the water, when he starts throwing rocks at him to get him to go into the water.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that thing of that Indian goes up, gets on the horses, and then he's like, Ringo, and then Ringo comes up. Ringo's been shooting some behind him. Ringo comes up there, shoots a guy. The guy falls like down between the horses. He shoots him again. I
love that moment where he uses Buck as his stabilizer, his shoulder as a stabilizer to shoot. I was like, oh, that's fucking badass.
And then the guy falls down and goes under the stagecoach, and and then stops, and then gets up, and he's supposed to be wounded, but I think they just kept filming and the stuntman got up. But that was Yakima Canet. So if you've seen, when you're driving down the highway, somebody has a storage container on their roof and it says Yakima on it. That's like named after the stunt guy, like Yakima, like whoever invented these storage things are like, oh, Yakima rode on the top of a stagecoach or whatever. Like, we'll call it Yakima.
Gotcha.
So he did that stunt. He did and then he did the John Wayne stunt too, of John Wayne jumping to grab he's like, the lead, we need the lead. So John Wayne jumps down, but it's Yakima Canet, jumps down, goes over, gets the lead, and is trying to get the horses going. And then it gets, just as they run out of ammunition, and Hatfield is getting ready to save Miss Mallory from capture by killing her. So in a way, he's a good guy, because he's going to do this, right? He's puts a gun to her head because he's like, we're going to be captured. I don't want her to suffer. And so he's out of bullets, but he's got in his Derringer, he's got one bullet. and he goes to shoot, and then he gets mortally wounded, and then the 6th U.S. Cavalry ride to the rescue. So
for me, it was almost the Mist kind of a moment. Have you seen the modern version?
Right. Yeah. The Mist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen King.
Yeah, where he kills his son. You know, basically shoots everybody. He's about to shoot himself, and he can't do it. And then all of a sudden, the mist starts going away, and the military has come through, and they're clearing everything out. And you're like, oh man, it was almost that kind of a moment. Where if he would have shot her, and then all of a sudden the cavalry bugle would have went.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god.
Oh shit. Yeah. When we see the man that killed Ringo's family, so I put this ahead because then it cuts to that guy playing poker. It cuts to everybody when they get into town. Everybody's like, is like talking, and somebody runs and tells somebody else, Ringo's here, Ringo Kid's here, and somebody else goes and goes and goes. And then all of a sudden you see the man that killed Ringo's family. He puts his cards down on the poker table, and they're aces and eights, which is a dead man's hand. If you know that, then you're like, oh shit. But also, so he's like, I know that I got to fight this. Like, he's being kind of stoic. But his other two guys are like wanting to drink the whiskeys, dropping all the fucking shot glasses because he's so afraid of him. And then when the door opens and it's Doc and everybody like gets in, Doc's like, whoa, it's okay. Or Andy Devine did that first, where he's like, no. At Lordsburg, Gatewood, the banker, is arrested. So this part's cool because Ringo asked him, ask Curly, how long will I get for escaping? He's like, probably a year. It's like, okay. And then he's like, and then all of a sudden he's like, so I'm going to let you go. He's like, oh, okay. Then all of a sudden the I forget if it's cavalry. No, the local sheriff is like, okay, we're here to arrest you. And then they're like, oh, and I think Buck is like, but, and then the banker says something, and they're like, oh, you thought you'd get away, didn't you? You thought that you'd make it, but you don't. And then they arrest him, and you're like, they're not there for Ringo, they're there for him. Like, awesome.
Yep.
And she learns that her husband's wound is not that serious. That Mexican guy too, back at the other place, I like how he's like, for one, we skipped over that joke where he's like, she took my horse. He's like, I used to whip him, but he was okay. And he's like, the horse or your wife? He's like, my horse. He's like, oh, okay. But
yeah, that was awesome because he kind of jerked his head like, what? Your wife?
But also,
no, the horse.
But the way he was like, he got injured. Oh, was it bad? Maybe. Like, he didn't know. Like, he's just trying to console her. Like, it was really cool.
And I love that everything he ended every sentence was, I think.
Yeah. She thanks Dallas, who gives Miss Mallory her shawl. Dallas then begs Ringo not to confront the plumbers, but he is determined to settle matters. As they walk through town, he sees the brothel to which she is returning. So at first, though, they stop at the brothel, and he's like, you live here? And she's like, no. She keeps walking, but you're also like, oh, this is where she started. Then she goes to, when you get to her house, it's like a bunch of rickety shacks where she's like, are you disappointed? And he's like, no, I don't give a fuck. Like, my ranch is barely built yet. Like, hang on. As they walk through town, he sees brothel. Luke Plummer, who is playing poker in one of the saloons, hears of Ringo's arrival and gets his brothers to join him in a gunfight to kill Ringo. And then I put here, they are so scared shitless. Ringo survives the 3-against-1 shootout that follows. So that's kind of smart too, where he just drops down and shoots them. And they're like, wait, we weren't expecting that. Like, wait a minute, you didn't fight fair.
Well, what's funny about that shot though, is I don't think it was meant to be that way, but he shoots as he's falling before he even hits, and you could just see the look on his face when he lands. Like, it was so painful. That wasn't, like, you could see it, like he didn't expect that's the way it was supposed to go. I think he was supposed to drop down and then shoot, but he shot and fell. Like, he shot and landed.
Right. So the look was more like, oh, that was different, but also, oh shit, I fired that too quick, too soon. Because I was thinking also, where if you're not doing it, you just got John Ford going, just jump down when you drop down, you shoot, and him then dropping down being like, oh, that was more than I thought. Like, I'm not slowing myself down or anything. But something else, I think I told you, just a funny story. This guy, Charlie, that used to work for us, he was a he was a tunnel rat in Vietnam. And I was talking to him, and he said he was at boot camp where they fight with the sticks with the pads on both ends. And he's like, so I'm watching the first guy that gets up there on the log to fight the other guy drops down to his belly. And the other guy's like, oh, and he can't hit him to knock him off. And that guy ended up knocking him off. So Charlie goes, so now it's my turn. And I'm like, I'm going to do the same thing. Not thinking everybody else just watch what just happened. He goes, so I drop down and the guy just beats the fuck out of me while I'm down on the log. So that would be like somebody watching John Wayne jump down and shoot and then be like, I'm going to do the same thing and just unload on you as you're laying on your stomach. So Ringo survives the 3-against-1 shootout that follows, then surrenders to Curly, expecting to go back to prison. As Ringo boards a wagon, Curly invites Dallas to ride with them to the edge of town. She's like, sure, I'll go. But when she does so, Curly and Doc jump off and they just stampede the horses. And all the horses just take off running.
Yeah, they start throwing rocks at the horses like they did before. Like,
letting Ringo ride off with Dallas to his ranch across the border. The end.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're like, oh, that was so sweet. So so here we go. Well, I guess I said this, I think, but not totally. No, I talked about Citizen Kane. Stagecoach has been lauded as one of the most influential films ever made. Orson Welles argued that it was a perfect textbook of filmmaking and claimed to have watched it more than 40 times in preparation for making Citizen Kane. So he would have like Agnes Moorehead, everybody who was in Citizen Kane be like, let's watch this movie. And he'd watch it and he'd take notes, and he was just like, wanted to get it down. When asked who his favorite directors were, Orson Welles said, I like the old masters, John Ford, and John Ford.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Reviews, Rotten Tomatoes critical consensus reads, typifying the best that the Western genre has to offer. Stagecoach is a rip-roaring adventure given dramatic heft by John Ford's dynamic direction and John Wayne's mesmerizing star turn, unquote. So I give this movie 5 out of 5 hearts. Chip, what do you give it?
4.5.
4.5. Okay. Why not 5, if I may ask? Should we ask that? That's really tricky, isn't it? Like, why 4? Because sometimes I'll go like 4 or 4.5. And also, if something good, you're like, should I give it for, like, I think West Side Story I gave 4.5. And the more I think about it, I go, maybe I should have given that 5. But anyway.
My only reason is because this isn't a movie that I would watch regularly. I would not make this like a habit of watching this and like saying, okay, I got to watch this.
Right.
At this point in time. It is an amazing, amazingly made because of the shots that we're talking about, though, because of what he's able to pull out of these people, because it was very awesome as far as them reacting to each other. It was almost like a murder mystery, but without the mystery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the way they would look at each other and just be suspecting of each other and not, but all the only thing that you were wondering was when the Apaches were going to attack. That's pretty much it. Yeah. Like that was the big secret, the big wonder. When is this going to go down? Because you knew it was going to eventually. So. It
was fun because though it kept running like a roller coaster. Like it was, there were no boring parts, but also that like you said, you're like, oh, when's it going to happen? And are they going to be, who's going to die? I don't want so-and-so. I like that character. I like that character. And and then it was just, and then just the surprise of when Peacock gets hit with the arrow, when he's like, here's to everybody. Yeah, we did good. Here's to you, Ringo. Here's to you, Peacock. And then all of a sudden, dunk. But also with the Peacock thing, I'm thinking like, that's still your inventory of whiskey that you're selling. Like you can't just get into my bag. When Doc first gets on, he's like, no, I'm not going to check this baggage. I'm going to hold it on my lap. You're like, why are you going to hold it? Because it's full of booze and I'm going to drink it all.
But I do honestly think that this movie needs to be set on Tatooine and they need to make a Star Wars version of it.
Oh, dude, you got something there, right? John Favreau, let him know. That would be like, you could have that be a Mandalorian episode,
Yep.
you know, where they pick up Mando, and then they're like, what's going on? But maybe he's not as cool as Mando is, but like, or like just some side character, like, you know. And you got the girl that works on the ships. I forget her name. Kristen Chenoweth. Is that her? She the singer? Yeah. No, she's the other one. She's the one from Strangers with Candy.
Yeah.
But you got her in there. You can put everybody in this.
Well, and that's the thing, is that you'd want it to be, I honestly think that it would need to be its own story that may lead into something more. Like it's a lead into something to where you don't need Mando in it.
Right.
It's like something that's happening to where one of those characters is somebody that you don't realize has a major part in the rest of Mandalorian or something like that. It's just a lead in that needs to happen.
Well, something that I just thought of, because they're doing that Captain, what's his name? Like, you could have him be the guy. Like, he gets picked up because he's wanted. He's whatever he does. The guy, Andor. Pick him up. He's the Ringo character, and you have him, and then you have all these characters around him, because you've kind of only seen him in, you know, Force. What was it called, Chip?
Oh, the
one in the middle, Rogue
One. Yeah.
Rogue One. Yeah. All right, Chip, you ready for Phil's film favorite of the week?
Yes.
Okay, this was hard to pick, but I'm gonna tell you one main one.
Out of the 20 movies you watched this week?
I actually this here lately, I haven't been watching much, because for one, I've been doing more stuff around the house. I got to clean while the wife's gone. I got to do whatever while she's at work. Because also
the Columbo in the background while you're
the other day. That's right. No, usually
Jerry Springer.
No, I haven't watched Jerry Springer anytime this year. I've done with Jerry Springer.
Oh, okay.
Although I watched something close to it. I watched Jackass Forever, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I watch, Joe and I used to quote this movie all the time, Joe Weedman and I, A Fish Called Wanda, 1988. In case you don't know what it's about, a diamond advocate is attempting to steal a collection of diamonds, yet troubles arise when he realizes that he is not the only one after the diamonds. So you got, are you mentally deranged? You know, and the Ken's coming to kill me. So Kevin Kline is so great in this. Like, everybody's great in it. And I hadn't seen it for a while, and the wife started to watch it with me. And I was like, and you're remembering those things, like, oh, I remember that. Like, I remember that line. Like, I remember, you know, him talking Italian and French, and she's getting all excited. Even John, see, I want to say Lithgow, but the other guy, the guy from Monty Python, John. Chip, you're failing me. Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
I'll have it real quick. It's okay. Chip's supposed to be my eyes and ears. Institution.
I think I see his face. He is the one that keeps stuttering, right?
No, that's Michael Palin.
Oh, okay.
John Cleese.
John Cleese. Okay, so I'm thinking of a totally different person anyway.
Yeah. John Cleese, he's talking Italian, and she's getting all excited, and he's like, Italian is such a dirty language, I don't like it. And she's like in the middle of getting all turned on, and then he's like, how about Russian? And he starts talking Russian, which is worse, and she's just like, you know, can't get into the Russian. But all that stuff, and then Michael Palin trying to kill the old lady, but keeps killing the dogs accidentally. The lady has 3 dogs, and you're like, holy shit. And my wife's like, he killed the dog. And I go, yeah, but it's funny. Like the piano fell on it, or, you know, it got ran over by a car, and it was like a pancake. It looked like a dog pancake. You know, it was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that one I gave 4 hearts to. It was good and it was funny. And I was like, oh yeah, I really like this. And then the other one we talked about last week, I believe I talked about a movie called Murder by Death, where I told you I bought it was a 5 Alec Guinness. I was talking to Colleen the other day, and I go, so because I think it's because the new Obi-Wan's coming out that they have these 5 Alec Baldwin movies together. And she's like, Alec
Guinness.
Baldwin? Yeah. And she goes, you mean Alec Guinness? And I go, yeah, what did you think I said? What are you, stupid? So I was like, yeah. But so with that, I got Passage to India, Lawrence of Arabia, Bridge on the River Kwai, The Man from Havana, Our Man from Havana, and a movie called Murder by Death. So this Murder by Death, I told you, I go, you know, who knows if it's worth it, but I got that whole thing for $20, 5 movies, so $4 each. This movie's like Clue. You were talking about murder mysteries, but it's like, but they're making fun of it. So it's totally like the movie Clue. You could put these two together, which I totally almost want to do because I think you'd get a kick out of it. But it's Lionel Twain invites the world's 5 greatest detectives to a dinner and murder. Included are a blind butler, which is Alec Guinness, a deaf mute maid, which is the girl, Palmolive, you're soaking in it, that girl.
Oh, okay.
Screams. Colleen was like, you remember that? I'm like, yeah, it was fucking commercial. I always remember. Screams, Spinning Rooms, Secret Passages, False Identities, and more plot turns and twists than are decently allowed. So I'm going to tell you who stars in this. So you got Alec Guinness, David Niven, and Maggie Smith. They're
tiptoe
playing
in, tiptoe out.
They're playing Dick and Dora Chamberlain or Charleston, which are like Nick and Nora from the Thin Man series.
Yeah.
And then Peter Sellers is Sidney Wong. He's like Charlie Chan, which is, you know, racist but funny. Peter Falk and Eileen Brennan. Remember Eileen Brennan from Private Benjamin?
And Clue.
Oh, Eileen Brennan is in Clue? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So she's in this, and he plays Sam Diamond, and she plays Tess Skeffington, but she's like his wife, but Sam Diamond instead of Sam Spade. So that's, you know, so he's like a Humphrey Bogart type. And then Nancy Walker is that girl who's the maid. But anyway, Truman Capote's like first film. James Cromwell's in it. Like, you know, Fay Wray was in it. Oh, wow. Screaming Doorbell was Fay Wray. They ring the doorbell and they hear a scream and they're like, what was that? And then they ring the doorbell again. It's a scream. And they're like, oh, okay. Nobody being killed. So it's just wacky, like silliness. And it's a this is why I was thinking we could do it. We talked about Simon and Simon, talked about doing Neil Simon. That's a Neil Simon play. You could totally see it as a
really?
play.
Nice.
Yeah. So I was like, so we could either do that in Clue or do that. And
that would be perfect with Clue, because then it has, I think it would go better with Clue just because it has her in both of them. It has Mrs. Peacock in both of them. Yeah.
So, but yeah, so that's good. And that's where I know her from, always from Private Benjamin. And then I see her later on and I'm like, oh yeah. Another one where I saw Clue, but I didn't see it at the time I should have in 85. I saw it like later in like 95 or something like that. So, but I love Tim, what's his face? Curry. Thank you. He had a heart attack, poor guy. He can't sing and do all of his shit that he used to do. Or a stroke, not a
stroke.
Stroke. Yeah.
Well, and Howard Hessman's passed away. He was the chief that was outside. That was the kingdom of heaven is at hand.
Yeah. Oh, I always love him. He was in Dr. Detroit.
Head of the class.
And head of the class. Did you watch a new Head of the Class, by the way?
There's a new one.
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus or something. It's a female teacher, I think.
No.
Yeah, it's weird. I think they're already on season 2. Anyway, do you want to find out what's coming up, Chip?
I do.
Okay,
you better tell me so that I watch the right damn movie.
All right, I will. We will be back on April 8th for
a woman out in this white hell.
What are you laughing about?
He talks funny.
One of these strangers.
I'm taking this woman to hell. Anybody stopping me from doing that
has a deadly secret.
My theory is one of y'all's working with her.
But he has other plans.
Anybody does anything, kill him. Starting to see pictures, ain't you?
The Hateful Eight, rated R. Select cities, Christmas Day, everywhere January 8th.
That's right. From 2015, it's The Hateful Eight, another movie Chip has not seen.
Yes.
That's why Chip, in a way, last week, that's why Chip was like, I'm in the mood for a Western. So let's do Stagecoach and The Hateful Eight. And so this is both. Stagecoach, they're stuck on a stagecoach. Hateful Eight, they're stuck in a cabin. They're stuck in like a store when a storm hits, and they gotta stay there. So yeah. So I'm gonna give you the names of the people. What?
I was just thinking that would be perfect for a Star Wars thing. It starts out as Stagecoach and it becomes Hateful Eight.
Oh, there you go. That would be good. Yeah. Well, and that's what else they were saying. That Apache attack on Stagecoach happens like not even like you would think it would come at the end of the movie. No, the shootout's at the end. Like the Stagecoach attack is like 2/3 through the movie, and then you're like, oh shit.
Yep.
But yeah, it just works out so good. But anyway, all right. I can't wait for you to see Hateful Eight, and I'm glad that you enjoyed this one because it's a bit questionable, but not. Now I'm more secure in my picks where I'm like, no, Chip will like this.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good night. And what do you have to say to end this with, Chip? I'm trying to think of something.
Watch Stagecoach. It's good, especially if you like John Wayne.
Yes.
To see a young John Wayne use his eyes to act.
Yes. Instead of his mouth. I don't know what kind of acting he was doing with his mouth. I have to watch some of those old movies now. But that's something that we didn't even click on.
Maybe he's like enunciating or something, like he's over talking with his lips or some crap. And he's like, what the fuck are you doing?
Especially coming out of silent. But also what we didn't hit on, one of the best moments is when she comes out with the baby, him just looking at her. It's like powerful. Like you can see that he's in love. Like he sees her now with a baby and is like, this is a woman that I want. I thought I liked her before, but it's almost like girls seeing guys with babies and they're like, oh, he'd be a good daddy. He's like, she'd be a good mommy. Yeah. So yeah, it was very cool. Okay, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
The second day on the picture, there's quite a big scene going on in which I have one line toward the end of the scene. In the meantime, to keep me busy in the background, he has me washing my face and drying it. And he'd say, cut. All right. He'd look over at me and say, let's do it again. And now I become conscious that he's certainly paying a lot of attention to me with that scene going on over there. So finally I did, and he says, cut. Duke, you're dabbing your face. Can't you wash? And I said, I am washing. I'm doing this. What more can I do? I'm using the towel hard like that. What more can I do? Finally, all the crew, all the actors, the cast was completely on my side. From then on, I had the cast helping me, as my first time really in the big time, working with so many top people.
You think he planned it that way?
I know he planned it that way. He has a way of picking on actors when they're not too important a part of a scene in order to get them on the toes so they'll come in ready when they really have something to do. And then he handles you like a baby.